You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher Podcast, episode number 51. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher Podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Tech Teacher Podcast. I'm Katie Wardrobe, a music technology education trainer, speaker and consultant from midnightmusic.com.au, where I help music teachers use technology effectively in music education. In this episode, I catch up with Zach Gates. He's a young music teacher that I met at the Texas Music Educators Association convention that I attended back in February of this year. Zach actually co-presented at TMEA with Marjorie Lopresti, who is a leading music tech teacher herself from East Brunswick High School. And although Zach has only been teaching for a couple of years, he presented some great things at the convention. You can tell that he really loves what he does, and he's very lucky to have Marge to encourage and support him along the way. Zach and I mention a few things during the episode that you might want to follow up on after you finish listening, and you can find a list of the things that we talk about and all the relevant links on the show notes page for this episode at midnightmusic.com.au/51. Today, my guest is Zachary Gates. Zach teaches choir and beginning piano at Hammersholt Middle School in East Brunswick, New Jersey. He grew up playing clarinet and singing and took up teaching in 2015. He's already presented at multiple conferences throughout the US on music technology integration, particularly in the area of promoting STEAM versus STEM. And Zach has unofficially, tentatively renamed his beginning piano class as Beginning Piano and Music Tech. And I suspect that's because that's the direction that he is really interested in. And I'm sure it's awesome for the kids too. And while at a birthday party to watch the Mets play baseball, Zach was randomly chosen to throw the starting pitch of the game, and it wasn't even his birthday. So you must be a lucky person, Zach.
Honestly, they asked my mom, is that your son? And the first thing she said was, why? What did he do?
I've done that as a mother before. My kid plays basketball, and a parent, like a father, came up at the end of the match and he goes, "Are you the mother of number 9, the number 9 player on your team?" And I said, "Yes." I didn't actually say what did he do, but I said tentatively yes. And he said, "I just wanted to say how he's such a great sportsman. He helped my kid up because he fell over, and he was full of compliments." And I felt guilty for thinking, what happened? So what happened? So she said yes tentatively, or what did he do?
She said yes, and the woman who had asked her with the clipboard went into her walkie-talkie and said, "We got him." And my mother was like, "Got him for what?" And it turns out, and she explained, she was like, "Oh, he can, we want him to throw the first pitch of this game." And the first thing she said wasn't, "Oh, that's awesome," or that's amazing. She was like, "But it's not even his birthday."
You go, "Shush, Mom, shush."
But it ended up being nice because our whole entourage was able to go down into the green room. It ended up being.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
If that had happened to me, I would be actually terrified because I am terrible at throwing balls, and so I would not have wanted to do it.
Same. Unfortunately, you don't realize how far the pitcher's mound is from where you're supposed to throw it until you're there and people are screaming all around you.
The pressure. It's terrible.
Just a bit.
Oh my gosh. Now, we met at the TMEA conference, which happened not that long ago, only a month ago, really, at the time we're recording now. And it was great. It was very funny, though, because I was introduced to you, but then for most of the conference time, we called you Stuart instead of Zach. And I think that was because, it was Barbara Freeman. She said, what's his name again? I think it's Stuart. And I'm like, is it? I don't think it's Stuart. But for some reason it stuck. And because of her like misconception about your name, we just all called you Stuart. So it became a bit silly. And then we said it so much that I had to really think, no, it's not Stuart, it's Zach. So we need to get our head around this. But it was great. And you presented there with Marge, who's, you know, a mutual friend of ours, who's fantastic. And I understand she's been a bit of a mentor, you know, to you, because you've only been teaching a short time, and already it looks like you've achieved so much. And so tell me about that. Has that been good, having someone that you can, you know, kind of ask advice? I'm presuming that you ask her advice from time to time, and, you know, she might push you into certain things maybe.
Yeah, well, absolutely. She actually was, so in my very first year teaching, when they hired me on, I was student teaching in the district beforehand, under another supervising teacher. But Marge had, you know, seen me and was, you know, very friendly with me and spoke to me. And she was also friends with the professor that was in charge of observing me from Westminster Choir College, which I graduated from in 2015. Right. So she, you know, was talking to my professor and then started talking to me. And eventually I ended up teaching in the district. And so the district implements a system by which new teachers get mentors. And it's this thing that has to happen. Yeah. And, you know, whether or not I was going to be, you know, in this specific mentor program that I had to be, I think like Marge definitely would have been that supportive, you know, person.
Anyway. Yeah. And did you get to choose her, or did you choose each other for that program, or did that happen accidentally, or?
No, she was chosen by, I believe, the supervisor at the time, who is now on faculty at Rowan University, Mr. Jeffrey Lesser, who is a fantastic supervisor in East Brunswick when he was there before he retired. But yeah, having someone like Marge who is, you know, saying, why aren't you presenting what you're doing at this conference? And why don't you go to this conference? And so prior to meeting you in Texas, I had never been west in the United States, west of Ohio.
Oh, really?
And
wow.
So never in a million years would I have thought, oh, I'm going to go to Texas and, well, first of all, teach other teachers, since I've been teaching since 2015. But, you know, just to be able to have someone to push you as far as Texas is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, I think presenting at conferences is such a great thing. I find it, sometimes it can be a really good, like a confidence booster, because it makes you realize how much you know about a topic and how little other people might know about that specific thing, and how much you can help them with it. And because I think you can work in a silo a lot of the time. You don't often know what other people are doing, or, you know, you assume maybe that everybody knows how to do everything all the time. And it can be really good to present, and people are like, wow, I didn't know how to do that, or that you could do this, or what this thing was. And suddenly you realize you actually do know quite a lot about a specific topic. And yeah, it's great fun. So how have you found it? What's it been like?
Well, I think, you know, going right off from what you had said, I think that as a teacher, I really value, in a very serious way, 21st century learning skills, and what in New Jersey we call these career-ready practices, and basically just looking at the 21st century learner and seeing what they need, what skills they need to develop, and helping them develop those. And I think teaching chorus and a few aspects of electronic music, not more than a few really, allow for this heightened sense of collaboration.
Yes.
And I think that if we value teaching collaboration and the idea of collaboration, then as music educators, the idea of collaborating should inherently be very appealing. If it's something that we do believe we should value as teachers in content, we should also kind of live in as well.
And just on the collaboration thing, I mean, the thing today I really want to talk about is sort of three music tech projects or areas that I know you've been working in. And one of them that we just talked about before we started recording was a virtual choir idea. And I know many people listening, or most people listening, will probably be familiar with Eric Whittaker's virtual choir, which is, you know, a whole stack of people from all around the world all sang, you know, the different parts of one of his choral pieces and videoed themselves doing it. And it was done with, you know, click tracks and all this sort of stuff. And he had conducting videos and so on. And then the videos were all put together to make one massed choir thing. And it's quite funny, actually, because Eric Whittaker was actually at the conference that we met at, the convention. And yes. I didn't end up going to see him because I actually stood him up to go to watch someone else's, Shauna, one of her conference presentations that day. So I told her, I've you know, left Eric Whittaker for you. but I understand there was a huge amount of people watching him there. But you know, you took that idea and you've used it for collaboration in your own district. And I'd love to hear more about that and, you know, creating connections between different students in the district through this virtual choir idea.
Well, absolutely. You know, we have been, are you familiar? Have you guys been looking at the SAMR model?
Yeah.
You know, substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. The first time, honestly, I looked at that model, I was like, another acronym, another thing.
I know. There's so many around at the moment.
and I wouldn't say it's like, even as a new teacher, you're already, you know, full of acronyms, but I don't know. I don't know where that is. But, you know, looking at redefinition as being the quote unquote holy grail of how the quality with which we're integrating technology into the classroom. I love choral music so much, and I love technology so much, and synthesizers, and just anything that I can get my hands on that's new and digital. And aside from accompanying choirs with digital instruments or modifying their sound either post-live or in a live space, those are all very fascinating options that I think need to be explored to really redefine how ensembles communicate with each other musically and non-musically, and show that it is possible for the choral field to like take this step in public education, since Eric Whittaker had already done it so well. I think his vision and I don't think he was looking at a SAMR model and saying, no. I really want to redefine choral. No, but I think just his inherent artistry just led him to do that. And so that I found very inspiring. And I feel, you know, as many people do, that his aesthetic is very appealing to younger people as well, and people of all ages. But I saw what he did was like, that's what our public school needs, because East Brunswick is very unique in the fact that our support on an administration level and curricularly is extreme for positive vertical articulation across the board. All the teachers are friendly. We talk to each other. We know what each other is teaching. And there's a consistent philosophy and, in my opinion, in my perspective, very consistent flow and follow through of quality choral education. But unfortunately, because we have a 6th and 7th grade middle school, a 8th and 9th grade junior high school, and a 10, 11, 12 high school, there are all these little gaps and we've sent out surveys to see and kind of map how kids in chorus, both in the higher level audition groups, and also what we call the YALCOM groups, you know, try to map their choral experience in an enrollment sense. And there were just these extreme gaps. There was no consistency between either the students who were high achievers musically and those who were happy being in just general YALCOM chorus. So we viewed the virtual choir as something that could really bridge these gaps, give kids something in the critical pedagogy for music education sense, something more of their world that will resonate with them more. And so we went and built our own little little I wouldn't say it's little, but
yeah, no, I already know that would be a huge amount of work. And so tell us about the mechanics of putting that together, because I've watched the behind the scenes video that Eric Whitaker has. He has a "this is how we did it" kind of video, or an explanation of the technical side of things, and it involved things like he made a conducting video which was essentially silent but in precise tempo, the tempos that he wanted. And then there was kind of like an introductory click that you had to listen to if you were. So basically, choir members from around the world would record their own videos singing just the soprano part or just the bass part, and you would have to have headphones on to hear the click, and so on. And then you'd start singing your part, and you'd sing along with the tempo track or the conductor video. And then eventually they put it all together, and you need to do that because you've got to synchronize all the different videos and, have people at the same tempo. So what did you do? Did you do a similar process?
We went a very, very similar process. Building it took a lot of time, and a lot of people are like, wow, how much do you get paid for this? I'm like, nothing, but it was really worth it. I promise, when I go and present this, because it was to see what he did on a professional level with thousands and thousands of dollars in budget and this huge creative team. It took quite a bit of time just to see how to scale that down to a more manageable level. But so very first we had practice tracks. We set up a free website on Weebly just to kind of host everything that we wanted to. The practice tracks came with PDFs of we started with the national anthem because this was kind of the inaugural one. We didn't want to do anything with a 7/8 to 6/8 to 5/8 to a slow 4/4. We
changing tempo. Yeah, no, not good.
We wanted to keep it pretty simple just for the first time because we knew while our students had known what the virtual choir was and were very into it, we kind of just wanted them to be very comfortable with this initial process. So that discomfort with technology wouldn't be compounded by musical discomfort and, result in not a lot of enjoyment. Should kind of be against the point. So basically, we had tracks with the audio split for their part and someone else's part, however they wanted to do that. And then we had a record page where, just like Eric Whitaker, we had those videos, only instead of course, Eric Whitaker conducting, it was me. And I, as a person who is fresh out of 2 levels of conducting classes with these very discerning people staring at every tremble your pinky makes as you conduct, I have never felt more nervous conducting than making these conducting videos.
And that was just because it was video recording. Like, I know a lot of people, as soon as you hit record, and even for these podcast interviews, I'm sure it's the same sort of thing. As soon as you know it's being recorded, like, suddenly it's terrifying. I don't know why. And I've only found that the only way to combat that for me is just to do it so many times that it becomes just a normal part of life almost. But yeah, isn't that interesting? That's so funny. And so, but did you do them over many times? Was it one take wonder, as I call it, one take wonder, and then you were done? Or did you do them 3 or 4 times thinking, nah, not good enough?
So I very quickly realized that what I was being self-conscious about was these very subtle artistic things that I think is not really, there's not a huge point to trying to convey and also collect these extremely articulate, artistic, minute gestures from whatever you're doing for this kind of purpose. So I very quickly, by the 3rd take, I was like, you know what, Zach, this is going to be functional, and you will excel at your functionality with your conducting.
Yeah.
And that's really what let it be what it was. And so at the very end, I was super happy, and it's not because I lowered my standards, but I just realized what the function of this video needed to be.
Yeah.
For the national anthem.
Yeah, it's an important distinction to make in a lot of stuff you do, I think. And I'm a perfectionist, and it's very hard to let it go. But you have to at some point, because you'll just never finish anything. This is me anyway. Unless I just go, okay, that's actually fine, and no one's expecting it to be any more than that. So you've just got to draw the line somewhere. So wow. So they had the conducting video to watch, and then how did they record?
A lot like Eric Whitacre, he had this portion where you were supposed to clap along with the tracks. So I made the mistake of only asking for one clap.
Oh no, yeah.
So here am I thinking, wow, I was so smart. I added that clap. It's not just a preparatory gesture. You gave them something to clap. You can line up that audio no matter what. Except my clap was together, but
not
their clap
else's. Yeah,
very much was not. And so that just took a little bit of bouncing back and forth. So I specifically I'm a big fan of Ableton Live. So after the kids were recording their video on whatever device they were able to find, because accessibility was really what we were looking for. And as soon as they were happy with their recording, because of course they were able to record and re-record as much as they wanted, they were able to send their files through a Google Drive upload that we were able to put on the website via Google Form. And I took those files, I broke apart the audio and the video so I could work with both separately, just to make it more manageable. Even though Ableton Live does have that dual video, I knew that my poor computer had to process 172 audio files.
Oh my gosh.
So I was like, let's keep it at audio files because I still want to have a computer after this project is over.
Yep.
So I put them into Ableton Live, although any digital audio workstation is totally acceptable, because as far as kind of the post-production that I put onto it, I know Eric Whitacre, whenever I bring up virtual choir, people like to kind of, take one jab at it, that there's a lot of reverb.
Reverb, I was going to say, yeah. And I know, I'm pretty sure he said somewhere, and I had probably guessed this anyway, that they had quite a bit of reverb to make it all meld together, sort of to cover up really some of the,
Absolutely, and that is also why we added, I think, a fair amount.
A tasteful amount.
It also came, yes, of course. It also came down to his philosophy was accessibility. We're not using technology to close doors, we're opening them. So he had a philosophy in the submission process that no submission would be not taken. If you sent it in, we took it. And so that's exactly what we did. If you sent it in, we're going to take it.
Awesome.
Did some tracks have more reverb than others? Yeah, some had a few more. But that was really mainly just because in our recording instructions, we told them to stay away from ceiling fans if they were by a major road, to maybe get away from the tire noise if they perhaps lived next to a zoo, perhaps find a quieter location to
Move
record.
away from the lions, closer to actually not monkeys. I was going to say monkeys. They're really noisy.
So we did ask them to vacate loud spaces, but some people still had mom cooking in the background, and in one a telephone rang. So for those, like, the reverb went up just a little bit, but that actually leads me to another thing that I really liked about this. Virtual choir, we talk about technology being able to open up doors and for this to kind of increase the accessibility level, like having these students who weren't singing across buildings being able to communicate musically together. But also I found that, it made what we do way more accessible to the home life and to the community as a whole. Because I was watching, I got to see every video that kids sent in, and I was like, what am I looking at here? I'm looking at them singing, but I'm also looking at them singing what could be for the first time ever at home. And there's a mom or a dad or a sibling or someone somewhere in that home listening and being like, what's that singing? What are you doing? And so I personally was really, really excited about that portion, and also the ability to have teachers and administrators. We only had two administrators, my immediate supervisor, John Perillo, and the building principal at East Brunswick High School, Dr. Mike Vanilla. We actually got to have the principal. We gave him cymbals to crash during the land of the free, and that always got a big laugh. But that got a big laugh when we debuted it at our spring concerts. Both the junior high school and the high school got to debut it. But while we were testing this audio system, actually, a security guard had walked up to my supervisor and said, pointing to the virtual choir, "They're really good. How long did they rehearse together?" I kid you not.
That's a great compliment. That's a really good thing, isn't it? How hilarious. Wow, it's such a fantastic project. I think doing things like that also, it has such a big benefit for yourself personally when you're trying out things like that. Like from a tech point of view, you can learn so much from trying to synchronize videos together, just as an example, or trying to synchronize audio together. And I would have done the same thing. I would have separated the audio. And just by the way, for people listening, I frequently get asked, how do you separate the audio from the video so that you can do something with one or the other? Often the reason is for film scoring. People want silent videos and it's got a track already, a soundtrack already to it. And I'm just going to say, just for those listening who are curious, once you put the video into the software, i.e. your video editing software, or even a lot of the time, even the, the digital audio workstation, those two things come in separately anyway. They're on two separate tracks. So it's really easy just to get rid of one or the other and delete the other one and keep one, or mute and solo them even. So that's just a quick tip. But yeah, it's such a great project to learn things yourself. And I love doing stuff like that. That's the same sort of approach you would take. Another thing I find people are curious about are those, the a cappella videos that you see on YouTube where it's the same one person and it's got like 6 of them on the screen and they're singing 6 different parts. And how do you make those videos? And it's basically the same sort of approach. They've basically recorded themselves singing the separate parts of the song and 6 different videos, and then you just bring them all together, but you have to synchronize them. So the technique is usually to add a clap or a series of clicks at the beginning, which end up getting wiped off, so you don't end up hearing them in the last version, but they're the things that you synchronize together. So it's a great technique and a great project. And I'd love to talk about some other projects. It's funny, I wasn't really planning that we would talk about that one, and then we were speaking about it before we hit record, and I thought, it's such an interesting one, though. We're going to have to include that too. But I know, what you were presenting with Marge at TMEA was, to do with sort of the STEAM thing. So, projects including synthesis and that type of thing. And I know you've been doing that a lot with your students. So tell us about what's the sort of things that you've been doing with them. How do you start out teaching that to students? Because I'm guessing they're sort of familiar with synthesis, but not really consciously, they don't have probably a conscious awareness of it and what it is. So what are the sorts of things you start off with there?
Absolutely. So I find that synthesis is really hard to break down at its little tiny bits when teaching, because as an interface, it's an instrument, so it needs to be efficient at changing and morphing sounds as you go along. So from a professional standpoint or an intermediate person's standpoint, the synthesizer with that core knowledge is really effective because of how things are placed and the words and the abbreviations that are for each effect. They're extremely helpful and efficient, but not so much when you're actually trying to break it down, which is funny because the most complicated synthesizers, ones that span entire rooms and cost $50,000, those are so good because the modules that create the electronic synthesis are broken down into little bits.
Yes.
It's just so much you can't consume it. So I think just really basic sequencing of, and not digital sequencing, but which is funny, but just sequencing of the information so that almost like one would teach vocal production or the science behind vocal production, you start with the first exciter. What is beginning this process? For the voice, it's breath. Without breath, we have nothing. And so what is that for electronic synthesis? That would be the electricity. And so when I speak to them, I make it very clear, because I think this is the coolest part of it, that throughout my initial demonstration of what electronic synthesis is, at the end of the day, you are hearing pure, at least in the form that we're approaching it, you are hearing pure electricity.
Yes. And I think people miss that all the time because I think we're so used to the version of synthesizers that most people come to first is a digital one, and it's the sound of a flute or a guitar or whatever, and it sounds exactly like the instrument that it's trying to be. But you forget that it's actually a recipe of lots of different little bits and pieces which are synthesized and made into that sound. And yeah, I think it's great to kind of work backwards that way and learn from the basics.
That's also because that's how the synthesizers are built. The signal flow and signal path, it's considered to be subtractive synthesis. So very much just that, going very, very all the way back to the source. So what I tell the kids is that, or what I tell my students is that, imagine we take our breath or the electricity and we put it into a rubber ball. And imagine a long hallway in front of you, and we're just going to take this rubber ball and we're going to throw it against the floor as hard as we can. And what is it going to do? They say bounce. And so that's when I show them that electricity can bounce or oscillate back and forth, going up and down. And usually it doesn't really matter if I'm showing them a square wave or a triangle wave, the shape of the bounce, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. But so long as they hear that bounce going back and forth, a very low frequency oscillation, but still audible. And then I tell them, I ask them, what do you think is going to happen if we speed the bounce up? And they're like, what? And sometimes, someone in the corner is like, it's gonna get louder. Yes, and something else. And so you increase the frequency of the bounce until it's, creating notes. And I think that's also a really great explanation vocally for the rate of frequency at which the vocal folds meet and vibrate together. We talk about, rates and frequencies. And I show them, and in making sure that they know that this is still pure electricity, I end every explanation back to showing them, just putting it right back to the bounce. And so the device that I use to kind of facilitate this is the Korg Little Bits. Korg, awesome synthesizer company. I personally really enjoy their products and what they put out in the synthesizer field. And Little Bits, this company that creates little motors and arms and fans and LED lights and light sensors and temperature sensors, and now they make Wi-Fi bits and Arduino bits and also Makey Makey bits. Basically in these little magnetic strips that you can click together. Korg and Little Bits came together to make a synthesizer that in these little bits, these little magnetic sections, you could just snap together and build your own synthesizer. In the very advanced sense, this is considered in the professional field to be called modular Eurorack synthesis. It's really cool. It's very boutique, and more people are getting into it because it is really breaking down the process of synthesis in all its forms. But Little Bits made it tiny hand friendly, which I think is key. So instead of having all these crazy knobs and scary things, all they need to do is turn one little knob, and they're changing the frequency of an oscillator on one little bit that says oscillator. So for beginners, it is just such a powerful tool. On top of the fact that not only can it teach electronic synthesis because it breaks down the breadth of the sound, the origin of the sound, and the different ways that you can morph it, while also teaching signal paths and pre-coding away, it also expands the possibility for accessibility through digital music and electronic music making, because with the pressure sensors and the light sensors and the temperature sensors, a student who may perhaps be limited for mobility or limited in any other way can change parameters of the synthesizer that core organ little bits made with these little bend sensors or pressure sensors, or you give them a flashlight and they can change a parameter and be tweaking sounds at the same level as kids who would normally be considered more able to interface with this. So I think it's incredible.
Yeah, and I think it's great to break it down and take that step back to physical things that you're touching, because I think it's much harder to grasp conceptually where, you know, if you're just looking at pictures on a screen like part of a software program, conceptually it doesn't make much sense, you know, and it's harder to see. But when you break it down to actual physical things, and then, you know, when you look at the software, you're looking at the software version of that, then it makes a lot more sense. And I think you can grasp the concept. Is it? Do the students find that it's? Is it kind of mind blowing for them? Like the realization that it's just electricity, and that's what they're hearing when they play a synthesizer, for instance. Is that a realization that you see them come to, and they go, "Oh, right, okay."
Very much so. They will actually, many times, they'll come back to class and say, "Mr. Gates, I found this song, and I'm pretty sure this is a synthesizer." and it's a song that has been on the radio for 3 weeks. You know, they've definitely heard it before, but for the first time, they're listening in a more analytical and deeper way. And I think that for a music teacher, like that's where it's at.
It's when you get that awareness and, things turn around a little bit. And tell me about, I know at TMEA you were showing us, I hadn't seen them before then, but it was the pocket operators. And since then, my favourite YouTuber, Andrew Huang, has made a how-to video. Have you seen this? He's made a how-to video about using these pocket operators. And it's basically like it's literally the size of your pocket, like if you have a shirt pocket, that is, a little rectangular shape. It's like a little board, and it has, you know, knobs and things on it, but it's really small and compact, and it's got buttons on it. You can do so much with them, make beats and do lots of sequencing and stuff. So I know you've been using them too. You didn't really get a chance to show them much at TMEA, but how have they been going?
So I believe at TMEA when we had, I hope it wasn't the first time. I think it was the second time that we had seen each other at TMEA. I'm pretty sure that I actually had pulled a pocket operator out of my pocket. It was. But they are just these awesome, awesome instruments that are created by Teenage Engineering, a synthesizer company that takes the idea of enabling parameters. The same way that box 4-part style writing kind of exploded your ability to be creative because of the box that it put you in, they have the same approach towards interfaces for synthesizers, and in the pocket operator sense, sequencers or drum sequencers or synthesizer sequencers that are sequencing 18 steps of musical data at any point. They made these instruments that are limited because it's hard to think of as a person who really enjoys working with them, because at first I saw them, and when you stack them against other drum sequencers, like the new Roland drum sequencers that are coming out, or what Ableton Live is capable of doing, it's like, why would I want this small, quote unquote, rinky dinky drum sequencer? But I think it's very much because of the box that it puts you in that it makes your creativity explode, specifically because of the way that they have the effects, the digital effects that you can put on your loop that you can write directly into the pocket operator. I find that it's super user-friendly, the ability to hold the effects button and improvise these digital effects into your loop, and then take them away and subtract them and layer them and mix them. It's really, really fantastic. And I think that now that specifically the Pocket Operator 33, which has a microphone on it, just came out, I think the box that Teenage Engineering created for pocket operators got way bigger.
Yeah.
So I was presenting at the NJMEA conference, the New Jersey Music Educators Conference. And my Pocket Operator 33 came in the mail between Texas and New Jersey, so I was lucky enough to be able to bring it. And Marge the session that Marge and I were presenting was music for the non-performer. How do we get music into the hands of someone who maybe might have performance anxiety when they're on the pitcher's mound, or when they have to conduct a video for a virtual choir, or when they're on a super cool podcast. But this kind of performance anxiety that just kind of seeps in. How do we take that away so that musical achievement can still happen? So that's kind of what we were looking at. So I took the microphone to the pocket operator and I held it up and I said, "Repeat after me. I don't like to perform." And I took that sample of them just going, "I don't like to perform," and I morphed it and turned it into this awesome song just right on the spot. And mind you, I had just gotten the pocket. I'm not saying because I'm like a pocket operator guru. I am not. Andrew Wong is the guru of all things, including pocket operators. He rocks. So I don't hold a feather to that guy, but I would definitely say that as a person who's versed in other pocket operators, but just got this one, the ability to dive right in and sample other people and change those samples and organize them differently, and then create a form to your pattern. So we're teaching form, and also have effects that do align to classical musical standards, being able to crescendo and decrescendo, being able to have a stutter in a duple meter and a triple meter, stutter the sound, or be able to glitch and hack the sound and have bit reduction. These fantastic digital things that as of yet have no backing in, except if you want to talk like a textural change, perhaps, but otherwise have not a lot of backing in terms of classical music terminology. It's fairly exciting.
Yeah, it's really cool, isn't it? I think it is good. And I agree. I love that thing about having limitations placed on you in order to be more creative in a way. The worst thing in the world is when you have too many options, too many choices. And I think that's the thing with a lot of software programs. You sort of open it up and you're like, oh my gosh, I do not know where to start. There's way too much going on here, so I'll just run away. Whereas if you have limitations or more simple things, and that's why I quite like, there's a lot of just really simple online music, creative, interactive websites, where you can just jump on and do very limited things. And the questions I always get when I'm showing things like that in workshops is, but doesn't it also record, or can't you change the tempo, or can't you do this? And I'm like, well, it's not for that purpose. Don't, you need to reframe how you're thinking about it. Use it just for this, or, use it as a limitation thing. And then later on, you can move into software to do things more fully fledged, and it's quite a good way to work and to learn about new stuff, I think. I would love to finish off. I know it's not a short conversation, but talking about the Scratch projects that you've been working on too, because I know you talked about the synthesis stuff in the session that I saw you do with Marge, but the Scratch stuff, I think we were talking about after the fact, maybe. I don't think we talked about it actually at the convention, and maybe in a conversation, but, I've been doing some Scratch stuff in workshops and I love it, and for those that don't know, Scratch it's a really simple coding software program. So you can jump on, you can snap blocks of code together, which are just basically little instructions in order to make things happen. So you have a character or a sprite, they call it, or a picture of some sort. So it might be a picture of a drum, say a snare drum, and then you can ask Scratch to make the snare drum make a sound by coding little instructions for it. So when this thing is clicked, I want it to make this sound, and you'll drag in a thing and say, I want it to sound like a drum, or you could make it sound like a cow or a dog if you wanted to, and you can even record your own sounds. And so I've been doing some projects with Scratch, which is fantastic. And then, of course, you came along and said, oh, yeah, I've been doing this cool thing with the video feature, which I didn't even realize was there inside Scratch. I hadn't gotten to that point yet. So describe the really basic project, first of all, that you've done with the video feature, and tell people, how does the video feature work and incorporate itself into Scratch?
Absolutely. So at first, the concept of it came from a want to fuse art and technology for music's sake. And the person that I had worked with this on, Dr. Janet Cape, who teaches at Westminster Choir College in Princeton, New Jersey, we were presenting on this stuff, and had kind of on Makey Makey related ways to make art interactive in a musical sense. And we were trying to think, how do we make other pieces of art like Starry, Starry Night? How can we make that interactive by touching the stars? And I had seen on Scratch in my kind of going through it that there was a turn video on feature. And I personally hadn't seen it before. And I don't know if they added it after the fact or it's something that's already been there.
And I hadn't seen it either, but I don't think I had looked hard enough.
So I took a string of code, which they are extremely easy to find. Any string of code that you want to work on in Scratch, it's a very supportive and forum-based platform where you can see what other people have created and you can remix what they've created. So if you're curious how to make literally anything on Scratch, not literally, but practically very, very much on Scratch, you can look to other people's projects that may have done something similar.
Yeah, I love that aspect. It's one of the best features of Scratch. They make it very easy for you. First, it's very what am I trying to say? They encourage you to share and make your own projects available to others. And I'm trying to do that as I make things, because I find I have benefited so much from seeing someone else's project. And then you can basically, there's a button which says see inside, and you click it and it opens up as the full project. Oh my gosh, it's brilliant, because then you can see how they've put it together. Some of them are so full on that I just go, yeah, no, I'm going to leave that one for later. But I love that aspect of that. The platform is very, very welcoming and encourages you strongly to share. So yeah, so you went and looked for a video thing?
So I had just taken a old string of code that I'd used from a previous project, just in my first explorations in touching a sprite, clicking on a sprite, and having the sprite make a noise. And I took the video tab, just chucked it onto the code, and my video camera turned on. I was like, is this going to have some video animation happen? I didn't even know it would turn my camera on. So my camera goes on. I'm like, this is interesting. And I see set, and then I took an if-then statement, which is basically, if this happens, then this will happen. And so I saw a motion under this sprite or motion over this sprite. So what it was doing was the camera would track the amount of motion perceived on a certain sprite. So with the if-then statement, I set it so that if the motion of the sprite was over the certain number, I'm not really sure what they were measuring.
Like a threshold or something of yes, I think I saw that too, because I was thinking, what is that? I was going to ask you.
Not quite sure what that's measuring, but essentially, if you cross over that threshold because your hand is waving over the sprite, it will then, of the if and then statement, it will then play a sound. So what this does is it allows you to, in Scratch, create these sprites that you then can see on your computer screen, and a lot like a cat plays with a toy hanging over it. If that's where you place it, which I think is just starting out a great place to put the sprites. But if you just kind of bat at the sprites when you do so, they will make a noise, and whatever noise you want them to as well. There are built-in things. You can do this with everything that's built into Scratch immediately, but you can also put in your own noises that you'd like. You can draw your own sprites.
It's so many options, isn't there? It's so flexible, I find. And it's funny because I presented a few days ago at a conference, and it was the first time since seeing your Starry, Starry Night project. So of course, it's the Vincent van Gogh painting, and, you know, you've taken the stars in the painting, and basically in Scratch, it's kind of hard to describe this, but the background in Scratch is, you know, sort of the background of the painting, and then you've separated the star parts of the painting. And they're basically circular shapes. I mean, everybody knows the painting, I'm sure, can picture it in their head. But each of those circular star shapes are individual sprites in Scratch. And so it's really great. So what I did was I just demoed it for the group, and I opened it up. So they were seeing the picture on the screen, and I was standing in front of my laptop video camera, of course, which was picking up my movement, my motion. And I I worked out that you need to stand a little bit back from the laptop so that when your arms are reaching up, this is how I did it anyway, your arms are reaching up and you're touching each of the stars, except you're not actually touching anything. It's kind of like a virtual reality situation where you feel like you're actually touching the stars because you're just raising your hand and you can see yourself in your laptop, picture, and see which ones you need to touch and, where to put your hands and stuff. So for people, I said to them it was hilarious because a couple of the teachers got out their phones to video me doing this. And I just had that thought that it must look really dumb, like from their point of view. Like I'm just standing in front of my laptop, like putting my arms up in the air and stuff. But of course, it's activating just by motion alone. I'm not actually touching anything. And so it was amazing. And they were like blown away. They were like, wow, this is really cool. And, I think it's such a fabulous opportunity for kids that don't have, the dexterity skills to play a keyboard, for instance. This sort of thing could be a great music making, option for them. And so you've used this with students. Have they put together their own projects like this? Have you done that with them, or have you just used this one?
So as of right now, they are just because I have only freshly kind of asked my administration to change beginning piano to beginning piano and music technology.
I love it.
Yeah, there's only so much that I can get away with music technology while still staying within the curriculum. Let's just say I'm very lucky that the Korg Little Bit synthesizer comes with a keyboard looking module.
Yeah. You just need to build the keyboard in Scratch just every once in a while and then just go, look, it's still keyboard class.
So we have gotten to the point where we are making musical loops, so teaching just things like steady beat and quarter notes, because that kind of language is built into certain aspects of Scratch.
Yeah.
It's also been great to also kind of visualize a keyboard. You can make a keyboard that behaves and looks a lot like the one on musictheory.net.
Yes.
Where it can give you this kind of instant feedback as to whether or not you're clicking the correct note if you code it correctly. So they've been working at that at a very basic level. And so far, just to still fit within the curriculum and not have, a principal walk by being like, that's piano?
Yeah, what is this class? Hang on, I thought this was keyboard class.
And children are
touching the stars. Yeah. I was just going to say also, I will actually link to the Starry Night project on Scratch so that people can go there. I don't even think you need to set up an account to view a project. I think you can just look at it. So I'll link to it and people can go there, and basically all you need to do is I think you need to click the green flag that's at the top of the picture that you'll see, which will kind of get Scratch going. And you need to, it will ask you to give permission for using your microphone and video camera. I think it'll ask, can it access those things? And once you've done that, then you'll be able to do what we've been doing, which is touch the stars by waving your arms randomly in the air. And so other things that you've done with Scratches, but this has been the main thing so far, has it?
Yes, just doing with the students these musical loops and also interactive pianos that they can build. But as far as the video interactive, I've showed it to them and we've talked about it, but unfortunately they haven't yet been building their own.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. That's good though. There's something to come. When I saw it, I thought, I'm sure there's so many things that you could do with that facility, like touching things to make music. I don't know yet what exactly, but it's kind of good because it's a little bit like an extension of the way the Makey Makey works with Scratch. And I think we've spoken about that on a different episode of this podcast, where the Makey Makey is a little, it's like a little board which basically takes the place of your mouse or keyboard, certain keys on your keyboard. So instead of clicking on the screen in Scratch, you can actually do something with the Makey Makey and basically set it up so that you can touch something physical to trigger a sound in Scratch. And it's just a great tool. If you watch the Makey Makey video, you'll see that they use bananas and Play-Doh and stuff like that. So that always goes down well. But this sort of thing where it's you touching stuff, it's kind of like another extension of that or idea. Just great. I think it's great what you're doing. I think it's awesome that you're experimenting so much, and you've been teaching a relatively short time, and it's really good just to keep experimenting. And I think it can be very hard as teachers because there's so little time, but you need to kind of build it into what you have to do anyway. So I think that's what you're doing already. It's like, I want to do music tech stuff. I'll just make my keyboard class, and music tech class. And it allows you have a reason now to play with these things and find out the way things work and then incorporate them into classes with students. So such a great thing to do. What's next on the horizon? Have you got things, that you're planning on learning or more of the same?
Absolutely. So I am in the process of making the second virtual choir now that I'm teaching at the middle school. So when I was at the high school, the goal was to make a bridge between the junior high school and the high school. Now that I'm at the middle school, we have 8 different elementaries in the district that all have fantastic programs and very supportive administration for the arts there. But it's 8 elementary schools who we're asking to be in these ensembles maybe in 6th grade all of a sudden. So to have them all participate in this musical event, we're now bringing the virtual choir to the lower levels. And so to kind of modify that, we're going to this time do a version of In the Jungle, I believe.
Nice. Very nice.
Yes. So a little more kid-friendly than the national anthem. And it also allows, because the teachers throughout our elementary schools have different resources available to them, and they have in terms of rooms and in terms of technology. So what a song that's a little bit more upbeat than the national anthem allows us to do is kind of give the elementary kids, if they need it, more bite-sized pieces to record rather than recording beginning to finish an entire song we asked for the national anthem. So that kind of modification for our second run through, I think, is going to be critical for the success of the second one.
That sounds awesome. That's really good. Do you have the first one online anywhere that people can watch?
Yeah, you can find it at EBPS. That stands for East Brunswick Public Schools virtualchoir.weebly.com.
All right, excellent. I'll link that in the show notes as well. And I'll link to all the other things that we've talked about, the Korg little bits, the pocket operator, Scratch, and so on. And I'll link to Zach's specific project, the Starry Night one, which is just great, and maybe a few others too. So thank you so much for coming on today and chatting. And I can't wait to stay in touch and see, what you do in the future. And when the next virtual choir things happen, we'll have to share that around too.
Thank you so much for having me as, Zach or Stuart or, whoever it is.
Whatever you want to call me. I know you were so good about it. You're just like, okay, whatever. I'm going to just go with the flow.
Right.
Oh, it was very funny. It's great. And hopefully we'll catch up again at another convention sometime. I'd love to come to the New Jersey one year. I'll see if I can do that. It's very close to the Texas one, so it's a good one to do just straight after. And Ohio is just before, so it would be great to get to all 3 sometime, but we'll see how that goes. All right. Thanks so much, Zach, and I'll look forward to seeing what's up next for you.
Thank you so much, Katie.
That's it for today's show. I hope you enjoyed listening to Zach's story as much as I enjoyed interviewing him. And as always, if you'd like more help with using technology, I'd love you to come and join me inside the Midnight Music community, where you can access online courses, video tutorials, and lesson plans to help you use technology in your music teaching. For more information about the community and a special offer for podcast listeners, go to midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information and links from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/51. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.